everyone, and welcome to the Vegas Legal Magazine podcast. I'm Mark Fierro. Vegas Legal Magazine publisher Tyler Morgan has the day off. Joining us today, Fierro Communications Vice President Jeff Haney. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we have a great show with one of the state's top attorneys with some insight on a controversy that impacts the entire state. When Nevada legalized recreational marijuana, there was an expectation that Nevadans had something of an advantage in establishing its licensing regulations. After all, we have decades as the world's leader in background check and robust gaming regulation. The first year of recreational marijuana sales seemed to go quite well, but in 2018, everything seemed to change. And just last week, District Court Judge Elizabeth Gonzalez ruled that some licensees who were approved under the 2018 structure would at least be temporarily stopped from opening their doors due to weaknesses in the application process. Joining us today, Dominic Gentile, one of the attorneys who led the charge to have the application process enjoined until errors could be addressed. And as a quick point of disclosure, our firm works closely with Mr. Gentile. We're working on this case with some of the applicants who were denied licenses. Thanks for joining us today, Dominic.
Thank you for asking me.
So at the start of this thing, the first bell that rang was some of the top dispensary owners with just essentially perfect backgrounds were completely shut out of the process, and others received multiple licenses. Where did you start? Where did you start with this case?
You know, we had nothing to go by when we started because the process was not transparent at all. We couldn't even learn from the Department of Taxation how they scored our applications or why we didn't prevail. When I say we, I mean the clients that I represent.
Total 12.
And they refused to answer any questions. They set up a meeting where you could go in and speak with them, but that was it. You could speak with them. They weren't going to speak with you. So we basically took a step back, kind of got back into our civil rights mindset, which really had little application here, but it was all we had to go by, and we filed a lawsuit that was basically a civil rights suit with some additional claims in it, and we took a traditional due process approach to it, but we really didn't have any facts other than the fact that we were denied a license.
It was interesting when they first sat in the room, it was, well, where did I score? Well, you got a 46 or a 93 or 2000, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But they didn't know what anybody else got or why, and they could not bring an attorney.
And there was absolutely no way to compare the score that any given applicant got to anything at all. And then, of course, during the legislative session, it came to the governor's attention, and he called for an enactment of a law that basically caused the Department of Taxation to have to disclose some information. And when that information came out, the suit was already in progress. But when that information came out, well, then we acted upon it, let's put it that way. And there was some great stuff in there.
One of the things that came out in questioning, we'll jump to that because I think that sets the stage for everything else, and that's the Cronkite memo. So you've got this person that's right near the top of Nevada taxation, and they're discussing what appears to be sales of marijuana to a minor.
3 of them, 3 different sales from 3 different dispensaries, all owned by the same company. Frankly, I responded to that not only as an attorney, but as the father of a 17-year-old son. What the record shows and what the judge found is that 3 sales were made. The Cronkite, who was part of the Marijuana Enforcement Division of the Department of Taxation, initiated an investigation by her testimony. And then within a matter of a very short time, she was directed by Jorge Pupo, who was her boss, to withdraw the investigation and to remove the information from the files. And so they basically suppressed it. And the irony of it, if that's what it is that the transgressor, the operator of those 3 dispensaries, obtained 7 licenses because it never came to the attention of anyone, not only that they weren't compliant, but that this suppression occurred. And if it wasn't for just getting lucky, we would have never received that email.
Any idea why an investigation into a matter as serious as the one you just described would be quashed? Why in the world would something like that happen?
Well, the first 7 years I practiced law, I practiced in Chicago. And you learn a little bit about corruption when you practice in Chicago because you're surrounded by it in those days. I can't say that this process and this particular suppression was as a result of corruption. I can only say that it felt a lot like Chicago.
Well, isn't that the big question? Mark and I have been, as Mark mentioned, observing and working closely on this case for quite a while now. And I guess what looked like the big question to me from the start up until now is, it kind of shapes up like this. Are we looking at mere bureaucratic sloppiness, just kind of bureaucrats, slipping and sliding and kind of doing the wrong thing and just acting sloppily, or is it actual corruption? Because to me, there's a not so fine line between the two.
Well, let's talk about some of the facts that came out, and then I'm going to leave it to you to draw a conclusion. I've drawn mine, okay, but I'm a lawyer in that case, and so there are certain things that I can say, and there are certain things I can't. But what I can definitely do is tell you what the facts in the record are, so you can make up your own mind. The facts in the record are that a lawyer, not just a lawyer, but a lawyer who, as a result of her efforts, obtained more licenses than anybody for her clients by maybe half the licenses that were issued. There's testimony in the record, although she did not testify. But there's testimony in the record from Jorge Pupo that she bought him meals, drinks, entertained them, had his personal cell phone number, called him often. I heard yesterday something that, if it proves to be true, would indicate that she was given, and her clients were given, absolute inside information by probably Pupo, because he's certainly the person who has admitted to some things already. And so, as it turns out, the dispensaries that sold the marijuana to the minors were represented by her. And if you can start drawing lines and connecting the dots, I think you can draw a straight line between her, Mr. Pupo, Miss Cronkite, and the suppression.
One of the most telling things in this Cronkite memo that lays out is very brief, but it spoke volumes. And the last thing is not only do I want this removed from the log, there's no investigation. I want to see the wording that is inserted to the log before it goes into the log. And the context of this is just as the application process is just beginning. He just cleaned up what could be a felony sale to a minor.
No, it was. It had to be.
And all of this happens at a time in court where within days, it's nothing to do with us, it's national media, the New York Times, several are talking about, hey, all of us were kids, teenagers, sit out in the parking lot, have a beer, that's the end of that. but we're just starting to find out what happens to the human mind consuming marijuana before the age of 25, and it's not pretty.
This year, I actually did a lot of study and listened to a lecture by Dr. David Smith. Now, Dr. Smith has more experience than any person alive dealing with teenagers and drugs. Dr. Smith is the man who started the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic back in the early 60s. Okay, so nobody's got more information than he does. And I heard him say, and I saw him put on a presentation that says that if you are under 25 years old, marijuana can cause permanent brain damage. And the younger you are, if you're in the area of 12 to 17, it's almost certain to result in some serious problems, including schizophrenia. So there's not much doubt that, separate and apart from, there's a good reason for the law to not sell marijuana to somebody under 21 years old. And that is a health reason, which is one of the reasons and one of the concerns that the people in Nevada had when they enacted first medical marijuana, but more importantly, recreational. Because with regard to recreational, the objectives were to basically eliminate the black market for marijuana.
Somebody was making $500 million.
And to relieve law enforcement of the obligation to prosecute possession of marijuana cases, and to specifically to protect minors so that marijuana would not be sold to people under 21. And yet that's exactly what was done here. The testimony at the trial hearing seemed like a trial of 120 days.
Yeah. Not a short trial either.
No, not even, no. But the testimony at the hearing from Kara Cronkite and Jorge Pupo, neither of them reported it to law enforcement in the sense of they didn't go to the Attorney General, and that's their lawyer. They didn't go to Metro, and all of the sales took place in Clark County. They didn't go to Henderson Police Department. They did not report it to law enforcement. So as it stands right now, the public certainly does not know what happened, other than the fact that Deputy Director Pupo gave an order to Cronkite to stop the investigation. He indicated that the reason was that they self-reported, but that's no reason at all, not to stop the criminal investigation.
Well, the context of all of this is that, okay, there's the sale, and now we know that sale to minors, some of the issues that they list, psychosis in young minds, schizophrenia, concerns that this schizophrenia could be permanent, that these minds could be destroyed forever. And now you put that in the context of this not coming forward, that it be removed, that the fact that it was removed also be expunged from the record. All of this, the entire sales that we started out with so well, recreational, and then things went sideways, all of it is predicated on the feds staying out. The Cole memo basically lays out a structure wherein the federal government says, as long as you effectively police and enforce those laws, we will stay out of your backyard. This seems like an open invitation.
If the state of Nevada, some law enforcement agency or the legislature or the governor does not open an investigation with regard to the palpable and highly probable presence of corruption here, then I think not only that the feds will, but I believe they should. We are not talking about the diversion of marijuana to the black market. That's wrong, okay? That's wrong. But there's been black market marijuana out there forever. Until recently, it's the only way you could obtain marijuana. We spent billions of dollars and almost a century telling people that marijuana was bad for you and putting them in jail, and now all of a sudden we're going to tolerate the sale of it to minors? Something's wrong with that, and that's exactly the kind of thing that the United States government, the United States Attorney's Office, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the DEA for sure, should look into. I would hope that the state does something so that that doesn't happen, because the moment that the feds stick their nose into the area of the lawful sale of marijuana in Nevada and they tell us, you know what, you're not doing the job and therefore we're going to act, that could put an end to the entire program, which means a lot of tax money that won't go to the benefit of our
70
schools.
million a year, north of 70 million.
A lot of jobs too.
A lot of jobs, too.
We've had industry leaders on this very podcast numerous times, and they all tout the fact that they are creating a lot of jobs in the state in that business.
Right. Well, it's unthinkable. As luck would have it, the judge did in fact halt the progress of the licenses of the operator of those dispensaries. Not for that reason, for an entirely different reason. But at least at this point in time, that operator, with regard to these more recent licenses, the licenses that were issued in December, will not be able to implement them. But, if it happened once, well, let's put it this way. We live in the state of Nevada. Odds are something that we deal with better than anybody on earth, okay? What are the odds that it happened once and we caught it?
Yeah, and we heard about it right away and put it right up there in the newspaper. This puts, that operator, when they self-reported because they had to self-report. The mother of that minor was coming screaming down in the lane, and your whole future is predicated on her not going to the state, so they self-reported. The state, in some ways, is put in sort of a parallel situation. If they don't do something, and the feds do something, and the feds having acted, then the state does something. It just looks like they did it because they absolutely positively had to.
Well, and there's also a political component here, and some people ignore that. When this happened, the Cronkite memo was May 2nd, I think, of 2018, which puts it 6 months out from the gubernatorial election last fall. The Republican candidate was Adam Laxalt. His deputy that was running the office is now the United States Attorney. And the testimony in the record from Jorge Pupo and from Cronkite is that they never brought it to the attention of the Attorney General. Now, you can be sure that had they done that, not only would they have responded, because our United States Attorney, Mr. Trutanich, he's got a reputation for being a real straight shooter. So not only would they have responded, but can you imagine, and not that it should have happened for that reason, but can you imagine the political capital that would have inured to the benefit of Adam Laxalt by catching it and moving on it? All right. Now, Adam Laxalt probably would not have, in fact, I could tell you he wouldn't have done it for political reasons. He would have done it because it was the right thing to do. All right. But it just seems to me that it's just unthinkable that it wasn't at least brought to the attention of the Deputy Attorney General that oversees the Department of Taxation to ask him, what do we do about it? And they admitted that they did not bring it to his attention.
Particularly in a state where you walk down the hall and you're talking, this is not some far-flung state. These are people who know each other, come in contact with each other on a regular basis. It seems to me that the one guy that is completely able to act freely is Governor Sisolak, because all of this preceded him coming to office. He can be the guy with all the answers, but the clock is running on it. It seems as if there's a fuse on this. If the feds step in, it's going to look like he did it with his arm twisted behind his back as opposed to moving very quickly.
Well, I read a press release, I think yesterday, that appeared in John Ralston's
Independent.
Nevada Independent. We're basically, and it was a press release from the governor's office. I don't know that it was the governor himself that, said these words, but it came out of the governor's office, and it basically took the position that, well, that happened under a prior administration, and so it sounded like they didn't intend to look into it, and they were just waiting for the commission that's going to take effect next June or July to write the process, which means that we're not going to learn what happened, and more importantly, we know what happened. What we don't know is why it happened, and that's where the high probability of corruption resides, and that can't go on. It just can't.
Another key moment in this case was when your firm, demanded records, emails, calendar entries, texts, phone calls, and so forth from Mr. Pupo of the Department of Taxation. Were you satisfied with the result you received from that demand, and what was revealed in that trove of information?
The demand was not complied with. There is one entire telephone number that has not been produced at all. It is his personal number, and that is the one that this particular lawyer, who I've been very careful not to name, okay, called him on. But, this case is just starting. A week from tomorrow, actually tomorrow, we go into court to deal with some objections with regard to that everybody's making, even us.
Sure.
And also to talk about the bond. But a week from Friday, we have to submit our discovery plan, where we indicate who it is that we're going to depose and what records we're going to demand. And we've been working on it. Let's put it that way.
I'll bet anybody a steak dinner at Delmonico's that we're not waiting until June for something to change in regard to this. I think the feds are going to be a lot closer to this than June.
It's pretty amazing how many anonymous telephone calls I've received just in the last few days from people who claim to have what we call percipient knowledge. In other words, this isn't rumor. I saw it.
Yep.
And I can only say that that's going to be very helpful in terms of creating our discovery plan.
You'll get some more after this airs.
Yeah.
What are the chances? What are the chances?
I can only say that if you call me, don't tell me your name, but I'll be more than happy to take the information as long as you tell me how you got it.
This is one of those times you might even pick up on the anonymous phone call that I know that you don't take and won't take messages. Yeah. Well, now it goes back to the same judge, doesn't it? This entire process.
Oh yeah. Well, we go back to the judge because we're the ones who filed before her. The others that have been coordinated for purposes of the hearing on the preliminary injunction, they will go back to the court that they were originally assigned to. So from this point forward, the courtroom won't be as cluttered, let's put it that way. Now, the interveners, they intervened in our case. So, it's they're going to be there.
Once they're in, they're in.
Once they're in, they're in. They asked to get in. And once, it's easier to get in than it is to get out.
The years ago, you and I have been around long enough to remember this, the gaming was cleaned up. Gaming had some real problems, had some bad actors, and those bad actors were allowed to stay in place by Nevada regulators. It was only when the feds came in and made some real moves. You saw the FBI just leaning on anybody from Chicago and St. Louis and these other cities, and that's what eventually brought in that whole new wave of outstanding regulators and Governor Bryan and John O'Reilly as his head of his gaming commission. I can't imagine that people in state government would forget that lesson and the optics of what that looked like. The people that are in now have the ability to rise above all of this.
Well, I think that I'd like to think that that's Governor Sisolak's plan. Okay, I've never spoken to him about it, but I'd like to think that that's his plan. And if it is his plan, then it would be my hope that he doesn't stack that commission with a bunch of politicians, but rather with maybe somebody who's a former DEA agent or FBI agent. Have somebody with federal experience on that. Somebody who's a former ranking officer at Metro. Maybe some people from some people who deal with children. To me, when I say children, I mean, a middle school, high school, with real background so that they really do understand how this affects people on a day-to-day basis. Some people that have been in the rehabilitation, drug rehab business. I can think of one right now. David Marlin would make an excellent member of that commission.
And perhaps gaming control as well.
Yes.
Controlling dollars, understanding inventory, understanding those issues.
Yeah.
Because it sounds as if there may be some further concerns in those areas as well.
Well, there's people out there. You've got Jeff Silver. You've got John O'Reilly. Some people who were Bill Erga, people that were on the commission at that point where it was needing to make that transition. And they got to see firsthand what needed to be done for it to happen. Somebody like that would be a good member of this commission as well. But, who am I? I'm not the governor.
When I look at it strictly from a political standpoint, and obviously, it would, I'm talking about helping our side, but when I look at it from a political standpoint, it's almost as if the stage is set for somebody to be made a hero pretty easily, pretty quickly by stepping in and saying, it's time to act. I've seen enough.
I got to tell you, if somebody does it so that they could be made a hero, they're doing it for the wrong reason.
Somebody's got to do something, and the clock is running. The idea that there isn't a fuse burning somewhere in a federal building, I just don't believe it.
I'll tell you what. We have a couple of new programs going on in southern Nevada now for young people that are using drugs and abusing drugs. One of them is the Ignite program. It's a rehabilitation center that focuses on teenagers. One of them is the Mission School, which of course is a rehab school. I mean, that's what I call it. All right, it's a school that focuses on on young people that have drug problems. What I'd like to see is people who are aware on that level. I'd like to see somebody who's aware on that level be assigned to looking into this particular episode and seeing how frequently it occurred and why it wasn't transparent. Because they deal with problems every day, and these are tough problems. They are. You're dealing with people that are making a transition from childhood to adulthood, puberty, all of the things that attach to that. They're hard enough to handle without them using drugs. Okay. And I don't know. I'm just I way beyond my role as an advocate just as a parent, I got to tell you, I'm incensed by it. I really am. This was just really wrong.
The mother in this case, evidently, she stuck with it, and she made enough of an issue out of it, and that's how we ended up finding out about it. Or as you say, none
Right.
of this may never have come up.
No.
If you care about this issue, the one thing is.
By the way, if that mom is listening to this show, I really would love to have her contact me. I really would.
We're not going to find out any other way. It's going to take a while before we ever get to there.
Right.
We may get there, but it will in fact.
Well,
be
I
a
don't
while.
think we're going to get the information from Jorge Pupo. Let's put it that
We
way.
can check that one off
Yeah.
pretty quick. Anybody that cares about this issue, to be clear, this is where I first became interested in the issue of the damage that are done to these young minds. And to be clear, none of these same doctors are talking about marijuana causing damage after the mind is fully formed. None of these guys are stepping out and saying at 30 years old or 40 years old. They're talking
No,
about 25.
There's again, I spent a couple of days with Dr. Smith, and the context of it was, juvenile drug use. So it's not that the subject had to be dealt with in the context of why we were there, but I can tell you that he stated flat out that once the brain is 25 years old, male or female, once the brain is 25 years old, you don't have that danger anymore.
There's not that issue. I heard about it on Joe Rogan's podcast. It went into detail. Joe does half of his shows with a joint under the table, I think. Big defender of marijuana. And
How come he doesn't ask me on his show?
the day will come, believe he did a complete 180 when he had a guest on that talked specifically about the teenage mind. And one of the things that was said was, these numbers that we use, 18 to vote, 21 to drink, they have nothing to do with the physiology of the human mind. Those are just cutoff numbers that have to do with responsibility. But the brain, the organic brain, is unaware of these numbers that we throw out and these laws that we pass. And evidently, the threat is very real. And in some cases, schizophrenia that might not have ever appeared in that person's life, psychotic episodes that may never have arisen. There's no way of knowing because the only one that did were the ones that the cases at hand. But it is real and it is scary. And it's almost as if it's two drugs. It's a drug for an adult, and when you're using it when you're a kid, there is some dramatically bad things that can come of it.
Let me ask another question about what's up next in the case. Your clients are essentially a group of established dispensary owners.
Yeah, they already operate dispensaries, medical and recreational.
So what are they looking for? What is a victory for them?
An even playing field, a do-over with an even playing field, where the rules are known to everyone, not just insiders. Where if you are going to seek points for diversity, gender, racial, things of that nature, ethnic, that it's legitimate and that some background checking is done so that if you have somebody listed, it's not merely because they are shills for purposes of getting you points, but that they really do bring something to the operation that makes it a better operation. Compliance. One of the things that the first application required that you designate the actual location where you proposed to open if you were granted a license. And you needed to do that so that they can make a determination as to the impact that it would have on the community. Now, the state is taking the position that community means the whole state. I don't think so, all right? And I don't think anybody really thinks so. I mean, what difference would it make to somebody in Pahrump that you opened up a store on the corner of Charleston and Las Vegas Boulevard, okay? So they changed that, and it looks like that change was made as a result of communications again from certain legal representatives to Mr. Pupo, and then lo and behold, the application changed, and now you could list a post office box as your location, and the people scoring the application would have to make a determination as to the suitability and the community impact based on the address of the post office box. Now, I have to tell you, I doubt very much that anybody's going to open up a retail marijuana store in a post office box. You know, not even the place that has all the boxes, but a box. Okay, it's not likely. And one of the applicants filed, I don't remember how many. I want to say 5 applications, the successful one, using the same post office box. When in reality, the applications were for different jurisdictions.
As opaque, as we were talking about earlier, as opaque as the system was for some people, including our 12 clients, now 11 clients, the other side seemed to have unfettered access. They knew about how strongly diversity was going to be considered. They moved people around for that. The floor plan, they knew it just had to be a floor plan. They didn't have to have an address. The percentage of ownership. They had just this plethora of information. They knew how strongly it was going to be graded. Yet, one of the most telling things in Pupo's testimony is when he's asked about these dinners that he has with this attorney and asked about these lunches, is that he says the application process never came up. And that's under oath. And that says something, I think. That says something.
It's not over.
It's not over.
It's actually just beginning.
Yes, we're 4 days into the learning process, 3 days into the learning process. This will go down. We're in the middle of one of those times, those big giant turning points in Nevada history. And this is going to be one for the books. And I very rarely talk about history when we're in the middle of things, but I'm telling you, this is going to be noted for a long, long time to come. I can feel it. I can feel it. And with that, we call it a day. The Vegas Legal Magazine Podcast. I want to thank you sincerely. Dominic Gentile, new partner at the firm of Clark Hill. Congratulations.
Yeah, our firm merges into Clark Hill in 3 days.
There you are. This is all interesting stuff. Tyler Morgan, publisher of Vegas Legal Magazine, will be back next week. Jeff Haney, vice president of Fierro Communications, Inc. Remember to like and share Las Vegas Magazine podcast on Facebook and catch us on YouTube, iTunes, or Stitcher. And for all of you out there with a story idea, or an axe to grind, get a hold of Vegas Legal Magazine, the leading magazine in the Southern Nevada legal market. You can call Tyler at 702-222-3476 and tell him I said hello. Reach out, tell your friends. Have a good one. We're out of here.